if you need me. Feel free to text me anytime. I'm usually pretty early to bed, so if you don't text you right away at night, I'll get back to you in the morning. Okay, the main thing they wanted us to go over was the syllabus, and I sent you guys all the main syllabus, the master. With the master syllabus, I've highlighted the areas that you need to change and personalize for your class. So once you get the syllabus, go ahead and check out that first page and change all of the highlighted areas to reflect your section number, the times that you're doing the Zoom, and any of your instructor information that you want to give, like your contact info. But that's on page 1. You can scroll through the syllabus and look. The only thing that I see that you really want to change besides that first page might be on page 5 that I've got shown on here. I put the assignment due dates. I just put the week of, and then I put the date that falls in that week. If you have a specific date that you want to put on your syllabus, feel free to go ahead and do that. I know that we all have preferences on when we would like it due, especially when we're working our online calls. So you may want to go in and change that. Personally, I'm just leaving it week of so that they can check the due dates on the course shell. Once you finish your personalization, make sure you email a copy to Beth Polk. Her email is on the slide also, and she'll need a copy of that by January 1st, just so everything's ready to go and she approves it all. Okay, the next point to cover is the Zoom etiquette. They went in and changed the master syllabus for every class, and they wanted it to be a little bit more specific. I'm not sure if you guys have done online classes before, but there are a few things that you usually see pop up on this. But on the page 7 of the second, I think they call it part 2 of our syllabus, they talk about all of the correct behaviors. Obviously, we know what's expected, but please go over it with your students at the very first meeting so that they understand. I know I've had some that they're just chowing down while you're doing class. It's a little distracting. So let's make sure that everybody knows up front what's expected and what's not expected. If you do have a problem with it, they ask that you go ahead and address the student personally, one-on-one, so that you can get everything taken care of that first time, what the expectations are. That's pretty easy there. Of course, we do want to make sure that everybody is polite to everyone and respectful in the class also. So again, if you do have a problem, of course you could say something right away if they're out of line, but it may be something that you want to address one-on-one with the student. Attendance is another big priority. They want you, if a student does not do any discussion posting or any assignment during a week, they want you to go ahead and put that in as a missed class for that week, because it's I guess we have people that are just logging on, but if they don't participate in anything, they're really, if we were a brick and mortar classroom, they would not be counted as present for not participating. This one, address the student again immediately if you have a problem. 2 tardies, that's anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes based on your discretion. If you have 2 tardies, that is an absence. And of course, if they don't show up for the Zoom session, or if they're late for the Zoom session, that would be either an absence or a tardy, respectively. And go ahead and mark that in the grade book so they have a reference point for it. I know it was surprising for a student in my last class to go on and see that and wonder why they hadn't gotten any credit for that week when they had not done anything, but it is something you want to do right away. And then speaking of right away, late assignments. If a student does not contact you ahead of time about an assignment, obviously we want to go ahead and put the 0 right in the grade book. They say we're having issues with not putting grades in, and then the student thinks they have plenty of time to do the assignment. So if the due date comes and goes, put the 0 in, and then that's a marker for them to go ahead, and they usually will contact you once they have the 0 and it reflects on their average. If they contact you and say, whatever reason that you think is valid for being late on the assignment, if you do choose to accept it, go ahead and grade the assignment accordingly. If you want to penalize them for the lateness, that's fine too, but you can do that afterwards, but we do want the 0 put in as soon as they do not turn it in. And of course, she does not want us to accept chronic late assignments. So if you have a student that's continually doing late assignments, you can just draw the line and say at this point we will no longer accept late assignments, and that is completely in your discretion also. Now, I would like for us to go ahead and just look through the class. Do you guys have any questions about those points yet? It's
I'm
pretty
glad they're in the syllabus this semester, because it was a major issue last semester.
Yes, it did. It left a lot to be deciphered on our part, but they made a point to get it in there, and they wanted us to stress it at the very beginning of class. So make sure you go over all of those with the students on the very first Zoom session, so you don't have any, there's no gray areas. It's all black and white on that one. I'll go ahead and just jump us into the class. I'll pull up the master shell here. Now, as we start, does anyone have a question about the shell to begin with?
I just went through it briefly. Do we address terms of service and any of that in the modules?
I'm sorry, do we address times of service?
Sorry, my terms of service.
As
the terms with applications, just letting them know that, like, hey, we're giving you applications to possibly use, and if you want to implement those in the classrooms, you may need to review terms of service to make sure it's age appropriate for your students.
Yes, I would suggest doing that under the digital citizenship module, and that would pretty much cover all of the questions you should have on it.
Okay.
I don't have any assignment on there that specifically says terms of service, but you know, it's definitely something. You don't want something that's not age appropriate going in front of, you know, first graders.
Yeah, because I was looking at the journal entry for week 1, and I was thinking that could be an area where we can put age limit, or because they're sharing applications, and I guess some of the teachers may go and say, hey, this looks nice to use, but then we don't want them going to utilize it with students in which they're not supposed to.
Right. And that's why I kind of left it open on the journal entries, because I would like for them to address applications and resources that they would find useful in their classroom. Originally, we had the discussion posts were split with the journal entries, so we had half and half for certain days. But I wanted it to be more meaningful, so I figured we would have you know, the students would get more out of it if they actually addressed an application that would apply to their classroom. If we dictated to them to say you're using this or you're using this, then I thought maybe it would probably not be as meaningful, especially for you know, if we had some primary grades trying to use you know, some coding products, it may not fit with everybody. Okay, did that answer your question enough, Courtney?
Yes, but I think just for me, I'll add it in my journal, because I see that being a problem, because we're asking them to look for resources that they haven't used before. So being that they're sharing resources that they haven't used before in their class, they may just find an app and share it.
Oh, well, we're not asking them to share it with their class. We're asking them to review it. So they'll go into an application, and part of that process is for them to look at it and to see, once they've checked it out, whether or not it's something they want to use in the future.
Got it. Okay.
Alrighty. Can everyone see the class here online? Okay. All right. The first thing that I wanted to look at, we'll jump into the discussion questions, and we have them weeks 1 through 7. Now, in week 7, it's basically going to be your the final project. So I've attached a rubric to each one. Feel free if there's something you want to address. I tried to leave it as open and as generalized for all of us to use, but if there's a specific area that you want to focus on with the discussions, feel free to. I have attached them so it does reflect on the grading. When it was first set out, they didn't automatically go, and it was sort of a pain to go in and grade it and then enter the grades afterwards. But on each discussion question, they do have it attached to the rubric. It's mainly the same questions that we've used in past sections of 620, so it's really very much the same. I jumped out of the discussion questions, I'm sorry. Now, with our rubric, with the journal entries, I also have a rubric, but this is going to be a little more open-ended because I've got just the specifics that we ask for. So if you do go in, as Courtney was saying, if she wanted to add something on there, if you want to change them or tweak them in any way, feel free to. The journal rubric just really gives us a starting point. If you want to leave it, that's great. I plan on leaving it myself, but it's just for us to go in and hit the highlights, and you get 2 points for this. We want to make sure that they're covering the bases of things that might affect them in the classroom. Obviously, cost is probably going to be the biggest impact. And, we want to see if it's free, that's great. Obviously, that will get more people interested. And then, and this is where it would probably apply to what you're talking about, Courtney, for the grade level intended. If you're researching something that is not going to work for a primary grade, and that's your emphasis in school, then you'll move beyond that. You won't have to worry about that resource anymore. Does anyone have a question about how we've laid out the discussions or the resources? I'm assuming you've looked through it a little bit. Okay. Every week I do have a journal entry just because I want them to have as many resources at the end of the class as possible. Obviously we'll cover some, but I think if they're also looking at one each week, ones that spark their interest, then I think it would also be a little bit more impactful. The discussion questions all typically fall in what we're talking about. Some do go more into a broad aspect of technology, but most will reflect what we're looking at that week. Our resources page is one that I've added. Feel free to add on to this. And if you do have some resources you'd like to add and you think everybody, all of us would be interested in putting on, feel free to share it with me and I can add it on for people, or I can send it out to them all. But I tried to break it up at the beginning just for the area that it covers. And then we got down to where I just have a list of tools, and on your pages, it has more description. I did not update it on the master here, but it does tell you exactly what some of these are so that when they go in to look at the resources, they can check them out. If you would like for them to use resources that aren't on here, again, that's your discretion. I think that's a great idea. If they have something in mind they've heard at class or at school or anywhere that they want to pull another resource, that I'd be open to that. But again, if you have something you'd like for me to put on there, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to add as much as possible. For our assignments, I'm going to jump into week one here. This is our very first one that they've had the same first assignment for 620 for a little while, but they've got it specialized on Weebly. If you want them to use a different application to create a website, or if you want to give them the option, I'm fine with that. I think that the main point here is that we get everyone familiar with starting their own website. If they're using one on their own and you're open to that, then I would feel free to let them go ahead and put everything on their own personal web page. But I found that Weebly is probably the easiest and the most options out there. So again, I do have a rubric attached at the bottom for grading. And as always, if you want to go in and tweak the point value or whatever, that's completely up to you. I just gave us a starting point so that if you don't want to do anything, it covers there. I always like to throw in a grammar and spelling part on it, but you may not be as focused on that. Design, there is some subjectivity to it, but we really want to have some room so that people understand that it needs to be clean. It needs to be appealing for students to use in the classroom. But I have it just for Weebly because I would like for more students to focus on Weebly. But if you're like me in my own personal classroom, I use a HTML builder, so I make my own. And if you had somebody like that and would like for them to submit it for their assignment, then that's up to you. Any questions on the week one? Nope. Okay, for week two, this is podcast video. In the past, it's been just a podcast. I added the video aspect on here because they wanted us to focus on flipped classrooms, and I thought that would be an easy way for us to incorporate this aspect. I use Screencast-O-Matic most of the time. I put some other options up here. I included the instructional video that they've had in the past for the podcast, and also put some instructions up here for editing and splicing video in case they wanted to record their own. Again, there's a rubric attached, and you'll see a lot of the same things from all of the rubrics. I usually just tweak them a little bit for each specific project. You'll notice that the point value changes from 20 to 25 points based on the assignment. It really shouldn't matter too much because they're looking at percentages, and that's what will go into the grade book. So if you start to wonder why one assignment was 20 points and last week's was 25, the reason is because it just worked out numerically how I had it. But I've set them up all independent assignments. So when it comes into the grade book, if someone scored a 90% out of 20 points, it's the same as a 90% of 25. And then in week three, we have the digital citizenship lesson plan. This is where they will make their own. And, if you wanted them to go in and focus on a lesson for terms of service, then this would probably be where you could put that in. The directions are not too specific and you're not locked in. So if you wanted to tweak those a little bit to say, focus on this, or if you wanted them to do a sign up genius and each have a different aspect of digital citizenship, then I would like to hear that too, because I think that's a great idea to put on here. The rubric, again, is a little generic for our lessons, but if you have something you want to add, you have complete control over that. Okay. If you guys have a question, feel free to stop me. Jump into week four's presentation tool. Now this will go into some of the different aspects that you saw on the resources page, but we have Spark Video, Visme, Verse, several different that they can create their own videos. And this really goes along with the flipped classroom. They wanted that to be a major point for 620 and also for 350, the undergraduate class. So if you want to limit this to a certain presentation tool, or if you wanted them to sign up for different ones so that the whole class can have examples, then feel free to do that. Again, this is just a starting point for you guys to see how you would like to assess their familiarity with the presentation tools. And I do have the rubric down here. This is not too specific because the main thing we want them to do is to learn how to use the presentation tool. I'm not as concerned about what's in the presentation. If you would like to be more specific about what's in the presentation, feel free to jump in and do that and tweak the rubric. Any questions on that one? Oh, okay. Okay, and then week 5 jumps in. This is our last big project, or not the last big project, but our last small project for the class. And they'll just take a lesson plan that they're planning to put into practice in their classroom, and they will change it to integrate some technology. The rubric is, again, it's pretty generalized because you just want them to include the specifics about the lesson plan and then how they would incorporate it. Feel free to tweak it and make it more specific to what you would like for them to focus on. This is just another one where they can take what they've learned in the journals and in the other assignments and put it all together for practice in their real classroom. And then our final project is the integrated one. And this is the big, this is 45% of their grade. And I've got a very detailed rubric on this just to incorporate everything that they asked us to do in the final project. And I've tried to be very specific about it. I didn't want it to be too long for the video presentation because that could eat up all of your last Zoom session. But of course, if you want to tweak any of that, again, it's up to your discretion there. And all we're doing is we're having them to integrate a classroom website that has several different technologies geared towards their classroom. The whole point is for them to feel comfortable with technology to use in their classroom. So we would like to see that they're at that point with this final project. And we give them the last couple weeks to work on it. It will be due right after week 7, so before the beginning of week 8. So check with your dates on here where you would like it to be due. Just remember that you need to get it graded and submitted before the end of the course. And also our last Zoom session with our class, they will be presenting everything. So just think about that when you assign the due dates. And that brings me to the due dates for your class. I don't have any due dates on the journals or the discussions or the assignments. So check out your syllabus on, I think that's page 5, that has everything, and that will be something that you need to go in and see where you want it due according to when you do your Zoom session. I know with my last one, I had everything due the day before we had the Zoom session, but I had my Zoom session at the end of the week, whereas I know some of you have yours at the beginning. So go in and tweak it and just see how comfortable you are where you have everything. Just remember that last final project is going to be due before you have your last Zoom session. See on my notes here if I've missed anything. Do you guys have any questions about how it's set up or anything in general about it?
I have resources on Tim with a technology integration matrix, because if you try to teach it, well, I teach that too. Like if you try to teach them, it can be a mouthful. So I have a Nearpod created that could possibly be used. I can share with everybody. I'll pull it up once we get off the call.
Yeah, that would be excellent. If you could do that, that would be much appreciated on my part.
Okay.
Excellent. All right. Anybody else have any questions about the substance or how it's laid out? Okay. On the bottom.
Appreciate all the work that you.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to show you one more thing that I was just thinking. At the bottom of your course, I have just standards on podcast resources. These were individual pages that were on the course before. My personal preference is to reduce the number of clicks. So I try to put everything on the face-to-face page. This is what we're going to do. So here's our itinerary. If you want to go in and change that, if you would like to have things on an individual page, feel free to do that. I know that I get overwhelmed if I start clicking and then I get lost eventually and jump down the rabbit hole. So I've tried to make it as streamlined as possible on here, but I do have the resources down at the bottom if you want to put those, publish them and put them available for your class also, if that helps you. All right, I'm sorry, I know I've talked very quickly on all of this. I was trying to get through it. I was afraid we'd run out of time, but I think I've hit all of the high points. Let me look and see what Susan wanted me to go over. The main points at the beginning of the presentation, they were very adamant about that, the changes they made to Section 2 in the syllabus. So please make sure you go over that with your class at the beginning, and it should save us all a lot of headaches if we do that. Of course, at graduate level, we shouldn't have quite as many as the undergraduate level, but we all know people are people. So again, my contact information I have on the PowerPoint, and I'm going to email that out to everyone pretty soon. I'm also going to make this presentation available as a video, and if you want to go back over it for any reason, feel free to. If you ever have any questions that you can't figure out, just shoot me a text or an email, and hopefully I can help you out on that. If not, I'll go to someone who can. I hope that everything on the course, works for you, and I hope it makes sense. If you do run into something that just doesn't make sense or something you would like to see change, feel free to give me that feedback so that I can, if that's something we can change mid-course that we need to work on, that's great. If not, we can do it for future sections also. Now, if you guys don't have any questions, I guess we can go ahead and sign off, and I will try to get you all of that other information as soon as possible.
Thanks, Shane.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.